I'm sitting here with Reverend Eldson J. McGhee, and he's going to give us a little overview of his book, Short Change. How are you today, Reverend McGhee? Can you give us a little intro on your book, Short Change?
Thank you, Clyde. I'm blessed, man, to have this opportunity to talk about my book, Short Change, Memoirs of an American Combat Veteran. This book was published actually in 2011 by Tree Huggers Publication, but since then we have several ties. But you can get the book on Kindle's Amazon, or you can write me or call me at 770-896-9566, and we'll get you a copy of a hard copy of the book. But it is available on Kindle and Amazon right now, and you can read it. This book is about my life experience as a Vietnam combat veteran. I tried to display, some of my background, where I came from, which is Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a Grady baby, but have roots throughout the state of Georgia. So my grandparents lived in a place called Marshallville, Georgia, which is right outside of Fort Valley, Georgia, where I've spent the first few years of my life with my grandparents, and I came back to Atlanta to go to school, and finished Washington High School in 1965 and was drafted into the U.S. military in 1967, where I went to basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, and advanced infantry training at Fort Gordon, and back to Fort Benning for jump school. Finished jump school and had a 30-day leave and went to Vietnam, where I think my whole life changed in 1 year. I was wounded in combat, but before, right after I was wounded, Dr. King was assassinated. I was wounded in March, and Dr. King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, which I guess that was the first opportunity I had to come in contact with racism on a level of violence, where there was riots in Vietnam where people didn't even know about, which was not publicized because it was the U.S. military. But after being wounded in Vietnam, I was diagnosed with combat fatigue on the battlefield, which is the predecessor for PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, which is right now. When I returned from Vietnam, there was no acceptance of post-traumatic stress disorder or war trauma at all being recognized at VA for veterans that have served in combat. So when I appeared at the VA in 1969, after being discharged from the military, seeking care, first of all, seeking care, because the change in my life was apparent to my mother, to my family immediately, making a transition from, well, let me put it like this. I was in combat on the 31st of November, 1968. And on December 3rd, I was at my mama's table, eating, interacting with my family. I think the first interaction, and I share this in my book, my mom was so happy to see me. She was just, my mom was not all that emotional kind of character, but she was so glad to see me. I'm an only son, so she was glad to see me. She was all over me, and I, all in my uniform, taking my shirt loose, and having to take my shirt loose, and I had on a war souvenir, for the lack of a better word, which was some ears and teeth that I had taken off kills that I made in Vietnam. My mom pushed me to the floor. I mean, it was, she wanted to know what is this around your neck? Yeah? I didn't want my mom to see what was around my neck, because I didn't want to share that level of experience that I had gone through, because it clashed with everything that I had been taught, believed up until the point of going into the military. It had such a drastic change on my life that I came back out of the military with an anger. Within 15 days after I was home, the SWAT team had surrounded my house. And except for the grace of God, I probably would have been one of the first casualties of that war, coming home to Atlanta, Georgia. And it was a police officer. I don't know whether he was with the Atlanta Police Department or whether he was with Fulton County, but I wish I could know. I wish somebody would look in their records and tell me. This officer took off his gun to talk with me. And I think that made the difference between a shootout with me and the Atlanta Police Department. PTSD is an insidious disorder that's brought on by trauma. It changes the brain, it changes the mind, it changes the behavior of its victims. And, well, I come out later on to realize that you got a lot of traumatized children in America today that don't even know they're traumatized. But the trauma that I had experienced changed and altered my whole lifestyle, my whole life. I wound up, I returned home in 1969. I was in prison in 1970. And I lived that life, that street prison life, gangster life, until 1985, where I was finally incarcerated with life without parole. And I did 20 years, 8 months, and 18 days in the belly of the beast, which is the penal system, the U.S. federal penal system in this country for bank robberies and kidnapping. And some of the things that I learned in the U.S. military. I brought it home because there was no understanding of war trauma at that time. There was no consideration for war trauma. Usually an individual went to war, he came home, and he reintegrated into society the best he could or she could with the conditions that they have. And I think that the problem with this, I was talking about in 1969, came really home this year when we saw the young veteran in Dallas, Texas, and the other in New Orleans taking out police that couldn't even defend themselves because they was unexpected. One of the things that people, I want to tell people, that post-traumatic stress is a disorder, especially combat post-traumatic stress disorder, is a mental disorder that can be triggered, and once triggered, you know, the person that's infected with the disorder is capable of mayhem, just absolute mayhem. All of their military training, everything that they learned in the military come to bear upon the situation that they're confronted to. They believe in their mind and their psyche that they are under siege. And the reaction of their behavior is to that feeling of being under siege. And that can be a very dangerous reaction from a militarily trained individual, which we could see from the young people in Texas and New Orleans. So my book talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, and it chronicles it from my being wounded in combat until I finish my treatment, I would say, because I got more treatment for my disorder in prison than I was able to get from the VA, because the VA was not prepared to deal with it, and they didn't have to deal with it. They had relegated me to the prison system. Not just me, but thousands of Vietnam veterans that was coming back home during that time period for all kind of crimes, crimes that they knew we would commit if we weren't treated, you know, given psychological treatment. And I would say I had more psychological treatment than most of my peers, because I was incarcerated. And they had to provide treatment for me. Otherwise, you know, I wouldn't be sitting here today. Had they not provided the psychological treatment that got me to a frame of mind that I could accept my condition and start working in a way that I could learn to manage it. It won't go away, but you can manage post-traumatic stress disorder. So that's what my book is about. And the book also goes on to talk about another deadly exposure we had in Vietnam, which is Agent Orange. It's a defoliant that was designed to help me as a combatant in Vietnam, because the bush was so thick you couldn't see the enemy. And actually, when I first went to Vietnam, I was carrying an M16. My training made me point man. for my platoon. You know, now when I say point man, a lot of people think you walk a point all the time. It's a rotation system. Usually you don't walk point no more than a week at a time. But anyway, my training was to do that, and a lot of times I learned that the bush was thick, and Charlie could use it to our disadvantage because the M16 would ricochet. If you shot the M16, it hit a bullet, it hit a bush, it's gonna miss its target. So I carried a 12-gauge shotgun pump during most of my tour in Vietnam because it was a better weapon for the terrain. And a lot of time that terrain was so challenging that we couldn't, you know, where we were taking on a lot of casualties. So Agent Orange was viewed by us on the ground, the paratroopers or the combat, the leg units, also on the ground, that couldn't see the enemy. So we call in for spraying. And what we saw those days, as God sent, has turned out to be one of the things that contribute to Vietnam veterans being the fastest dying generation of veterans ever. At the rate of 15 a day, based on exposures to Agent Orange. Yesterday, I saluted the transition of one Vietnam veteran that I was in high school with, William Brown. Died last week of Agent Orange related conditions. And his body was, they brutalized yesterday at New Life. So Vietnam is still working on us. So that's what Short Change is all about. You know, really Short Change was a con gang that we conjured up in the South in the 50s. And it always meant, you know, when you go in the store, if you give somebody a $20 bill and you bought something that cost $2 and they gave you $6 back, you're not going to leave that store till you get your change. And that's what Short Change calls for every veteran and every veteran family to do. Don't leave the VA, don't leave the government until they get the benefits that they deserve. And one of the things that Short Change do, after we talk about post-traumatic stress, the war, in the back of the book it becomes a manual telling veterans how to prepare a claim at VA and how to, you know, to manage their lives with PTSD. So I think it's a book that is timeless. It's a timeless book because it speaks to militarism and the experience that we have to endure when we go into the military. And that's why we have VA veterans benefits. These benefits was designed to provide health care for those of us that incurred bad health as a result of our military experience. You know, my health got to the point in 2002 that I was no longer able to work. So they declared me totally and permanently disabled by military service. That came about 20-some years after I left Vietnam. I was disabled when I returned home. But the forces of that day was not speaking out. They was not telling me what I needed to know about my military experience and how I could possibly regain some quality of life in spite of it. Short Change. Thank you, Clyde.
Reverend McGhee, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War.
Yes.
What are you trying to do here in Atlanta?
Woo. Louis Herman went to Washington High School with me. Louis Herman went to Vietnam the same time I did. Matter of fact, within a few days in December of 1967. Within a few days each other. He got there in December and I got there in December. I got there, I think, about 2 or 3 days before he did. He was killed in April. His sister called me when they was doing the wall down at the Slappy Floyd building, which number 2
Twin Towers.
Twin Towers. You know, his name is down there. Like all of the individuals that have died in war, from the state of Georgia. But that's a state recognition. Lewis was a Grady baby. He was born in Atlanta.
And Booker T. Washington student.
And Booker T. Washington High School graduate. This city should honor him. So I have been communicating with City Council to construct a wall for the Sons of Atlanta, which would list all of those from Atlanta. My design would list all of those from Atlanta, Georgia first, and in the backdrop will be all of those from the surrounding cities. I think that every city should honor the sons that they gave to this wall. And you know, my commitment is to make sure that those from Atlanta is honored. And we are in the process now coming up with a design. Actually was at the Folk McPherson Redevelopment Authority meeting last week and got their attention on this issue. Because right now there's no recognition of any of those that died in Vietnam by the city of Atlanta. So we feel like that's we need to correct that oversight. It's an oversight that 128 families still in Atlanta that lost their loved ones and don't have anywhere they can go except to the state building. They should be able to go to somewhere special at Folk McPherson, where a lot of us went through. We should have a permanent wall at Folk McPherson for the Sons of Atlanta. So that's what I'm looking forward to, because we are in the 50-year commemoration period for the Vietnam War. I think that is President Obama's legacy for Vietnam veterans. The end of that period will be in 2025, so he's given us enough time, and he's called upon all of us to do this together, to build a wall, to do something to recognize those that we know and honor them from Vietnam. So that's what my personal project is, and we're having some good feedback. Like today, we're having here at Omega Holiness Church a Black Authors meeting, book review, and I think that's what we've been trying to do with my show, Veterans Talk, is to get people talking about issues that are important to veterans, the community, and their families. Now, one of the things that I want to say, I want to just flick back to short change. The VA is the third largest part of the federal budget, 190-some billion, probably $200 billion a year after this year. They dump about $1.1 million into the city of Atlanta every first of the month with veteran benefits. That's short change. When you look at the number of homeless veterans, you look at the number of veterans who got claims pending at the VA, waiting on the VA to make a decision, we're being shortchanged. We're being shortchanged because these people are not getting the benefits that they've earned from their honorable service. And some of them are sick, Clyde. Some of them are dying. Thank you.
Reverend McGhee, you come out of high school, you go to Vietnam. Not only you go to Vietnam to serve your country, you come back home less than a year or two, you ended up sentenced to 20 years. Not 20 years. Life with no parole.
Well, I was
What happened?
I was Rambo. See, PTSD was not on the radar until Vietnam veterans started acting up when they were coming back. We had some bad attitudes. It was a change of things from what was normal for veterans returning home. We were kind of cutting up a little bit. Hello. Cutting up in a way that it made it impossible for us to be ignored. You know, in our own homes, some of us, like I said, my mom was the first person that told me something was wrong with me. I needed to go to the VA. So we had thousands of veterans coming back and integrating into their homes, and they would change people.
You a real live Rambo.
No, Rambo messed us up, because what happened with Rambo, the skills of veterans was displayed in a way that frightened people. You know, they didn't talk about, you know, the goodness of veterans and what they was going through, trying to reintegrate into a society that was rejecting them. You got to understand now, when I came home, I was expecting a ticker tape parade, but I got spit on. So add that kind of reception to being traumatized and walk, you got a confused individual.
Now tell me about them ears and your relics, your souvenirs you brought back home, your mindset.
Well, now the mindset of walk, you know, you got to, just like you have to adapt to every environment you go in. Well, in combat, there are things that, you know, we usually don't talk about that we do. In order to, I think, to adapt to the inhumanity of man against man. When you get a guy to kill and you know that it was your kill, in my unit you took the ear.
Great.
And in my unit you, in my unit you, the practice was you took something to make sure that you know that was your kill. Ears, teeth, fingers, whatever madness possessed you at that point of killing. I was 19 years old when I went into the military. I couldn't vote. I couldn't go into a liquor store. Neither could Lewis, but he died in Vietnam.
But you had a license to kill.
I had a license to kill. And when they took that license back, they didn't understand that they had planted me in an environment that would trigger reactions to the treatment.
Now we sit here and look at the urban setting and what that child, that youth see on a daily basis. How is that compared to the war that's going on now and how we are not dealing with it?
Trauma is almost like concussions. Well, it is a greater degree of concussion, you know. So we're just coming to grips with the fact that football causes a lot of problems. We like football. We have not come to grips with war because most of the people that want it don't have to go and fight it. So it is easy for us to talk about sending somebody into combat situations and not thinking about the aftermath. What is going, when a person is traumatized, their whole psychic change. And until you deal with that traumatic experience and the kind of things it causes an individual to deal with, you know, paranoia, fear, and, you know, it causes all kind of mental deceptions that we don't normally talk about, and some of us won't be in denial. I was in total denial about my conditions coming back from Vietnam, and that's the way most trauma victims are.
Well, let me ask you this, and I guess we'll wrap it up on this one. You had spent 20 years in being confined. How did you end up being a pastor?
Well, I took an attitude that I was not going to serve time, that I was going to make the time serve me. And with the help of NAACP, and I want to shout out to the family of Earl Shenholster and Ruby Hurley, and Cascade United Methodist Church with Reverend Kenny Brew. Those were people that came to prison.
Came to federal prison.
Came to federal prison and lifted us up in a way that caused me to establish a chapter, the NAACP in prison. And through that chapter, we was able to get Mercer University, the Cab Community College, Atlanta Area Tech to come into the school, into the prison system. Now, you know, a prison audience, a prisoner is the best recruit for education. They don't have any other things to do, really. If you give them an opportunity to go to school or to acquire skill, you're going to have a different individual come out of prison. So I think my change in my development, well, by the grace of God, first of all, and I got to give him all the praise and glory for that. But he put people, God worked through people, places, and things. He put people in my life that challenged me to look into myself to change, and provided me with the resources to do so. So I'm saying this: if every prisoner today had the opportunity to go to school and get skills and get education that would equip them for the job market. Now the ironic part, Clyde, I didn't tell you this, I was arrested at the VA hospital in the mental health department. When I came out of prison, I went back to the VA hospital and I became supervisor, went to work for the VA, and became supervisor of the mental health clinic. So, you know, in spite of all these kinds of things that's going on, I think that God is still in charge, and we should rely on that. And that's what I have relied on, and that's what got me where I'm in today. I couldn't have did it no other way.
On that note, I'll say thank you, Reverend McGhee, for Short Change.